Hi everyone, welcome to The Superficial Spirit, where we explore how pop culture affects our spiritual experiences. My name is Peter Breeze. Join me while we ask a very important question. What the hell did pop culture do to me? Welcome to The Superficial Spirit. Nice to see you again. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you're doing well wherever you are. It's been a crazy week here in Toronto. We just got announced that we are going into another lockdown. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised because the cases have been going up a lot. We are at, 1,500 cases today. And it's interesting because I feel like even though the cases have been going up and everybody was talking about how another lockdown was inevitable, it still feels a little shocking when it happens and very surreal to see the premier get on TV and be like, we're going into lockdown. And I was really irritated leading up to the lockdown because I felt like any kind of in-between phase is hard for me. I like to know what's happening. And I feel like the Canadian government has been a little passive when it comes to restrictions. And I understand there is it is not easy for them to prioritize the economy over people's health, and I totally respect that. And I am not jealous about anybody who is a politician right fucking now, because I can't imagine the pressure that they are under. But the different strategies of closing down different sectors in different parts of the region and different cities, I don't know. It just doesn't feel like it's enough. But I also feel like a full shutdown for 3 months is extreme. But then you look around the world, and the places that have gotten to zero COVID counts are places that have done extreme lockdowns. And then they get down to zero and slowly start reopening. And I don't know. I mean, if we could go on lockdown now in November and stay on complete lockdown until the spring, it sounds extreme. But then what if by then there was a vaccine and our cases were down to zero and we could really have an amazing summer and start fresh then? It would obviously be very hard, and the financial hardship is just, it's all very overwhelming. And I feel like every step of the way is a new emotional barrier that we all have to collectively go through. And again, it's bringing out such different sides of people. I was watching an Instagram video yesterday. A friend of mine who really believes that this COVID experience the COVID virus is orchestrated by the governments, and that it's part of a global agenda to control the populations and possibly even kill people in order to get the population to under 1 million people. Oh, no, sorry, under 1 billion people. Most of the time when I'm seeing these conspiracy theories, I am watching the videos and I am reading the articles very passively. But last night I did try to I wanted to understand what this person on my Instagram feed was talking about when she was like, do your research, know what go online, read these articles, read these videos. And I'm like, yeah, but what are you talking about? And a lot of people talk about Agenda 21 and the 2021 and Agenda 2030, which is basically a narrative about a new world order. And I'm familiar with these conspiracies because about 5 years ago, I was super into Area 51 and the Illuminati, but in a very superficial way, when everybody said Beyonce was in the Illuminati and Lady Gaga was in the Illuminati, and celebrities had to make these sacrifices to the devil or make a pact with the devil in order to become celebrities. That was the narrative that I found really interesting. I wasn't really thinking about the New World Order when I was reading about it as an actual thing that was going to happen. That was never a fear of mine, and I didn't take it all too seriously. And I was explaining to a friend last night that, for me, the consumption of conspiracy theory is escapism. It's the same reason why I just spent 3 hours watching Keeping Up with the Kardashians and why I love The Housewives. I feel like it speaks to the same part of my brain that just wants to kind of disconnect from reality. And it's interesting because, there are, and this is a point that my friend brought up last night, there are real conspiracies that are actually, demand a lot of attention right now that people largely ignore, like systematic racism, like access to healthcare, like voter oppression, like things like that are real. And then we focus on things that aren't based on reality. And I do think that we are living in a world where facts are becoming obsolete because people do not believe there is no common agreement on what is fact and what isn't anymore. And I think when you are triggered by something and you want somebody on the other side or somebody with an opposing opinion to understand what you're saying or to gain some perspective, it becomes challenging when you are rooted in such different realities. It's really, really crazy. So I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I do feel like it's just going to continue to unravel. And then, once there's a vaccine, who knows? I definitely don't think having a vaccine is going to cure the social climate. And I also don't think that everybody who needs to get vaccinated will. And yeah, it's just going to be an ongoing saga. By the way, I'm holding my microphone today because my ring light exploded. Isn't that great? Yeah, I turned it on. It didn't explode like into pieces, but it just kind of like short circuit, it burst, like, when you turn on a light bulb. Anyway, so if you're watching on YouTube, I'm going to be maybe moving around a lot because I'm sitting on my bed and hopefully the sound is okay, but I want to feel really comfy for today's guest. I started the podcast talking about I wanted to explore how pop culture affected spirituality because for me, it was very obvious that my obsession with fame and celebrities and how that influenced the way I lived my life and how I followed my dreams inevitably ended up to me having a relationship with my spiritual side and cultivating that kind of experience and lifestyle. But the podcast is also an exploration on nightlife. And the ways that community has affected me and other people's lives. And when I look back on my own journey, I am so lucky to have been able to share time with some really amazing Canadian talent, really smart, creative people that were really woven into the queer nightlife scene that I was lucky enough to be a part of in Vancouver and in Calgary. And the podcast gives me gives me the opportunity to dive a little bit deeper into these people that I've known for so long, but now because I have a podcast, I'm able to go a little bit deeper. I mean, it's an interesting opportunity because anybody who's listening here, I'm sure you have somebody in your life that inspires you, somebody that you've looked at and been like, oh my God, man, they know what they're doing. They have got it going on. They're leaving such an amazing mark on the world. Maybe you admire the way they do their work or the way that they raise their families or the way they interact with their communities. And I really encourage you, whether or not you have a podcast, to take time and really take this person out for coffee or for dinner and ask them more about their life. It's so interesting to be able to do that and really kind of give yourself the opportunity to see past the way you're observing somebody's life. Because if you think the story is interesting from the outside and the way that somebody is living from the outside, I can guarantee you what's happening on their internal world behind the scenes is probably just as captivating. So you don't necessarily need to start a podcast like I did, but I am here to tell you that reach out to the people that inspire you and let them know and, engage in those conversations and follow that inspiration. I do think that the people in our lives are what inevitably shape us. And if you can take the time to really, really get to know those people and explore why they influence you so much, I think it'll be really beneficial. And I'm so happy that I can share it with you. Okay, so today's guest, holy moly, a doctor. I am interviewing a doctor, not Dr. 90210. No, 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 no. Oh my God, it's my new song. Um, so my next guest is Maren Hancock, aka Betti Forde, a really well-known DJ in BC, actually all across Canada. She was in Stink Mitt, which was a huge band that toured all over North America, and she recently got her doctorate. Oh my God, so cool. And I've been wanting to interview her on the podcast for some time, and she's been busy finishing her doctorate. And I was just reading some of her dissertation this morning, and it was so fascinating. And I'm so excited to have her here and sort of take a look back at our experience together in nightlife, and also how that community shaped her, and also just getting a little bit of the fucking tea that happened on some of the landmark, huge queer nightlife spots that she was able to really bring to life and be a part of, and bring the community such amazing events, and sort of the story behind those experiences. Because, you know, when you go out in the city and you're going to these places and you're just going to dance, oh my God, remember when we could go out and dance? And you could dress up and get drunk and high and go and dance and make out with people in the corner. God, that I have never in my life thought about partying so much as I did since the pandemic. Like, I just can't imagine anything more amazing than going to a huge, massive dance party right now. Anyway, Maren was a huge part of my journey in Vancouver, and she opened so many doors and really introduced me to so many people that allowed me to live my dreams in Vancouver. This isn't just somebody who was a friend, who was nice, who, you know, let me into some parties. This is a person who first DJ to play my music in a club, first person to put me on VIP list, first person to help me help her promote parties, first person I knew who had nightlife as a full-time position, first DJ that I had that was a personal friend. There were so many things about her that were like these glowing, bright supernovas like this. I just felt like I was becoming friends with a legend at the time. You know, she was and is so inspiring and was such a force. And I'm so excited to have her here. And I know that you'll enjoy her too. So let's welcome to the fucking show, Miss Betti Forde. How are you?
Good, how are you? Can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry, I had to find like the right lighting.
Oh my God, I love it. You look great.
Thank you. You look great too. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for coming on. I feel like I was trying to remember the last time I saw you and I couldn't remember.
I think it's when I was horribly late for our lunch date.
Oh my God. Oh my God, sushi.
Yeah, when I was totally late. I was studying at the library, and so yeah, I was late, and I'm very sorry, but it was still nice.
That's okay. Yeah, it was nice to see you. I forgot about that. Yeah, I just moved here, and
When
you were
was
like,
that?
I've been here for about 3 years now. Crazy. Yeah, 3.
Mhm.
So I moved here and I was like, I need to find Betti. And then I
At the
found
library.
her.
Always.
Times have changed.
I know, right? Well, sort of, yeah. I mean, yeah, more or less. I do love libraries, though. And I'm sad I haven't seen the new Calgary one yet. It's apparently amazing.
So every time I go to Calgary, my mom's like, we have to go to the library. We have to go to the library. And all I've done so far is driven past it, and we never actually go in, but it does look beautiful.
I've heard it's astounding. I love the library in Vancouver, the downtown one, and it's got those like Star Trek like walkways, like you walk into your own like space island of study. It was really
totally, yeah. I fucking love it. I need to spend more times in libraries. They had that club that was attached to the library in Vancouver. What was it called? Library Square? Maybe that was.
Oh yeah, I DJ'd there, and Baz and those guys used to do a night there, or they moved a night there from the strip club, the strip club that girls Motley Crue is on Seymour.
Oh, Orange. No.
Not
Penthouse.
Not the Penthouse where I Stink Mitt played. Actually, Michael Venus did a dirt. What was that party called? My memory is like, whoo. When did you arrive in, so you arrived in Toronto 3 years ago. When did you arrive in Vancouver from Calgary?
Okay, so Vancouver from Calgary, I think like 2007 or 6. Like I went to film school first. Okay. And then after I graduated is when I like fucking went into the club scenes and became a terror and met you, which was amazing. But I was reading this morning, first of all, congratulations, doctor. Hello.
Oh, thank you.
Like, cheers. What a huge accomplishment.
Yeah, I mean, it could have happened sooner. I feel like it, it did take a while. So, but no, thank you. Like it's a bit anticlimactic because it took me so long, and that I went through so much trying to do it just because I had so many other things happen to me. And I had the health thing with developing severe osteoarthritis and whatnot, which made things really difficult. It was really hard to sit in one spot for a long time, but it's also like hard to walk, and it was just, you're always in pain. And so it was I really had to get that under control. And I also don't know if I would have finished if COVID hadn't happened because of my dialed in DJs. Like I was supposed to have DJed, for example, 3 or 4 times at the Gladstone this year.
Yep.
And I was like, maybe I'll see Peter. Because I know that you've taken Caleb's job, right? You took over Caleb.
I love the Gladstone, but it shut down. So I'm not there anymore.
I know.
But
it
like,
sucks.
Yeah,
but anyways, so I'm saying, like, I don't know. I would have been DJing 40 weddings this year. Right. And like, it's a lot too. Like with the Gladstone, I don't bring my own gear, but like if I'm doing, there's a lot of gigs where I do bring my own gear. So like, here's one of my speakers. It's 50 pounds.
Oh my God.
So there's 2 of those, and then suitcases. I don't know if you can see that. Suitcases full of gear.
Yeah.
And it's about 300 pounds, and I'm in a 5 flight walk up.
Oh my God.
So it was incredibly hard on my body, and I think that's one of the things that accelerated my osteoarthritis or whatever. But so I mean, it's grueling, and so then and then you're on site, as you know, you've done events, so you're on site for 10 hours, and you're on for 10 hours. Yeah. And then when you get home, it's really hard to sleep. Like I find that my body would still be reverberating with the beats. Like my body was still vibrating from being so close in between both of my speakers. And when you're doing a wedding, like I'm a wedding DJ when you don't want a wedding DJ. So everything's mixed. It's like doing 5 hours at Stacked. Mm-hmm. It's like doing 9 to 2 at the club, and you've got to get everybody on the floor the entire time. You know what I mean? And so it was mentally exhausting. It was physically exhausting. And so, I mean, I have to not thank COVID because it's awful and it's terrible and it's affecting everybody awfully and people are dying and all that crap. It's awful. But again, I don't know that I would have finished my dissertation. You have to be so focused to do that kind of writing.
I can't even imagine. And I agree with you about COVID. It did provide some opportunity. Like I started my podcast. I did a lot of writing. Like there is opportunity when you're forced to stop everything and you're like, okay, that thing that I always wanted to do, now I have no excuse not to do it. Right.
So you've always wanted to do a podcast?
Well, I've always wanted to be creative and share myself, but I actually reached out to you. I don't know if this was before or after I started my podcast, but I was like, I need to go back to school because the rock star fantasy fades away, right? I'm in my early 30s now. And I knew that you were getting close to finishing your doctorate. And I was so inspired by that. And I was like, well, if she can have such an amazing connection to nightlife, an amazing artist, and transition into that community, maybe I can. And you were like,
well, actually,
maybe.
Peter, I transitioned from academia into rock stardom or DJ. Like I was always a nerd. And so like Stink Mitt started by accident. DJing started to make money. I started DJing sort of by accident too, like a lot like you, like when I did my undergraduate in women's studies at U of Vic. So I was in Calgary and I couldn't leave Calgary really because my parents were both very sick and my mother ended up passing and my father ended up with a disability. And so it was nuts. And so by the time I got out my mother was still alive, but I went out to BC in 96 and did that undergrad. And I always promised myself when I didn't have so much to do, because I had to work through university as well, because I was paying my own rent. I moved out the day I turned 18. Like I've been on my own since then. And so I was like, I promised myself I'd get a college radio show. Because I grew up loving CJSW, right? I still listen to CJSW. Like it's perfect. They have jazz every morning at 5:30, but because we're 2 hours later in Toronto at 7:30 when I wake up.
Oh, perfect.
So I've gone like my whole 30 years of my life now, like waking up to CJSW. And so I really wanted a radio show. I promised myself. So I moved, and you read about this because I know that you read the intro to my dissertation. So that's why when I got to Vancouver, and I was teaching speech arts and drama, and that's why I moved to Vancouver and was thinking about doing an MA, but I was so burnt out and my mom had just died. And I was like, I need to chill and I need to do something that I really want to do, like for myself. And I want a radio show. So that's how I ended up at CITR. And that's how I ended up DJing by default for money. Like, so I never, you know what I mean? Like I was good at it.
Yeah, and now I feel like it's the exact opposite. People go into becoming a DJ because they want to make lots of money. And I find it so interesting because when I watched you, when I first met you in Vancouver, you seemed like you were made for that environment, like you were made to be in that DJ booth. And when I was reading the intro this morning, you talked about hearing DJs early on when you were exploring clubs and
Warehouse.
predicting what song that they would play less, and what song they would play next, and you were right. And I love that story. And I've never met somebody who predicted DJ songs
Well, it
before.
was also because I was so into that specific DJ Danny. So it wasn't like just any DJ, but I was going to the warehouse so much, and this is like before your time because I know I'm quite a bit older than you. So this is like 1990. And so
Nice.
rave is just kind of hitting, it's always been in the underground and all that kind of stuff. But like in terms of like, hitting any kind of like fringe culture, like, seeing a Prodigy video on Much Music, for example, or
Yep.
an 808 State video on Much Music in 1990. And also you had to go to clubs to hear that kind of music. And so I was listening so intently. And it was this one DJ, Danny, and I think he's still around Calgary, I hope. And he's amazing. He was the main DJ at the warehouse. And so I would hear him Wednesdays and Friday. And I would train spot him, which I didn't know what that was at the time. But I'd be hanging out in the booth watching. He was mixing on cassette tapes.
Oh my God, I didn't even know that was a thing.
Oh, you had? We didn't. There was CDs were just kind of coming out. Like, CDs were invented in '79, but they didn't become sort of mainstream until '85 to '90. And also, a lot of the music that was underground was coming from pirate radio or coming from your DJ friend in the UK that had access to whatever. And so they're sending you cassette tapes. You know what I mean? So Danny would be like doing like seriously beat matching with I don't even know how, with like a cassette. And so I'd just be like. And I remember I studied him so greatly. And I was like 16, 17. I had fake ID from the age of 15. And so yes, to say that a nightclub was a natural environment, for sure it was. But I was also this massive nerd. But I remember like watching Danny so intently, and I was like, drunk, and I'm 16 or whatever. And I was like, you're such a good DJ. And he was like, I thought I was hitting on him because I was so, but I wasn't at all. I knew he was queer. And I was also 16 and just didn't have I wasn't really, I think I had a boyfriend maybe, I'm not sure. But I was like, and he was like, I was like, you're such a good DJ. And he was like, and I'm also very old. And then I got like super upset because he thought that I was hitting. I was like, and you're also really gay and I'm not hitting on you. And then I felt like later on in life, I was like, that wasn't cool. Like as Calgary in the 90s, he's in the club, like, even though the warehouse is a safe space, it's a queer bar, like, you know what I mean? Like
you never know, yeah.
But I was so defensive that he thought I was trying to hit on him when I was really just so into the music. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So.
It's so cool to hear because I was called to nightlife. Like I felt like when I got to a club, that was my purpose in the world, to party and to become famous. But for you, it sounds like it was the opposite. You kind of stumbled into it, and then it became a tool for you to explore the ideas and the concepts that you had in one to push your social agenda and enrich it.
Yeah. I was also obsessed with music.
Yeah.
Like so much so that like I'm at the club and I'm train spotting and I don't even know I'm doing it. And then I started, so I just always wanted, and I was so hyped to share music with people. Like I really felt it was my job to because there's so much good music and people are listening to terrible music and people are listening to like Ani DeFranco and the Indigo Girls and like there's something better. Like let me help you. You know what I mean? So it's like I was obsessed with it, and I mean, and then it was a way that I could sort of work my way, and I was doing my master's degree, and the idea was to become a professor and be an academic. I wasn't trying to be a professional DJ or a professional musician. I just kept getting gigs, and the money was good, right, compared to working as a barista or whatever, and and I did love it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I started off throwing fundraisers and started in Calgary. I threw Rock for Shelter and Rock for Choice at the Republic with like Placebo Feist's first band and like and like all these wicked punk bands from the late 80s, early 90s, or actually mid 90s in Calgary now. So you're right. I was trying to push an agenda too. I was trying to push a musical agenda and a social agenda. Mm-hmm. And I did want to make things safer in nightlife for women. I really did. Yeah. And all that kind of stuff. But because Stink Mitt happened as an accident, I was never thought I was doing that. So it was really like, they were, we had 2 songs and they wanted to sign us and put us on tour right away. And I was like, well, I was 26, 27. And I was like, I guess if I'm going to do this, I have to do this now. Because I don't want to do it when I'm 45, which is my age now. Yeah. And now that COVID hits too, I'm like, well, part of me regrets that I spent 5 years touring the world and just like rapping and like lying on a dirty stage and like getting licked or something like that. But like, that might never happen again.
It might not. I mean, all the managers that I know are like not till 2022, maybe. So I think
So
you at least you have that opportunity that you got to experience that, you know?
yeah, and just even even every aspect of it, like all the travel would be like so prohibitive now because of COVID, because of flu.
Yep.
I never get sick, and anytime I ever did get sick was after I'd been on a plane, a train, an automobile, like touring. I'd come home
Yeah.
from tour and die. I'd come home
Yeah.
from tour. My partner at the time would just be like running me a bath and not even talking to me and just like petting me. I'd be like,
It's not as glamorous as people think. I know that's what you said when I was reading this morning too. It's like people have this concept of touring that it's like an amazing glamorous rock star lifestyle, but I mean, not until you become Lady Gaga, really.
it will break you.
Yeah.
Seriously. No, it is. If you don't have, and even then the loneliness, like you probably have started to make these assumptions, but you probably watched the Paris Hilton documentary.
Hello, of course.
They came out. I was like that about the Go-Go's documentary, but I mean, that loneliness is so true. Like the other thing, I think that touring and that kind of lifestyle prepared me for COVID because you're alone a lot.
Yeah.
When you're isolated,
Yeah.
you can't necessarily go here or there for these different reasons, right? And so like there's all kinds of barriers to that. And sometimes it's safety, sometimes it's language, sometimes it's just you have a show and the promoter needs you to stay right where you are. And you know what I mean? It's just like,
Yeah.
so
It's one thing that I found really interesting this morning was like I feel like I've known you as this force in nightlife for so long. And then reading that this morning, I just got a glimpse into what was going on for you internally when I saw you at the clubs and when you were letting me in, because you were the first for like so many things. You were the first one to play my single fucking at the club. You let me in VIP. I mean, the first time I was ever on a VIP list, you gave me flyers to hand out on Granville. I was like, I'm a party promoter. This is so cool.
oh, I paid you, or I gave you some drinks.
You gave me a lot. You gave me a lot, honey.
Okay,
yeah.
good. I'm glad I was supporting you.
But no. And reading this morning about how you were like your experience in nightlife, being a female DJ, and what you were purposefully trying to do, I was so blissfully unaware of it. I was just this little white gay boy who's like, I want to be famous. I got to experience that in a small way. And then there's people around me who are really trying to change the fucking world that I didn't even know was happening.
Well, that was kind of the whole idea, was that you slip in the, if you want to get somebody like to, accept an uncomfortable truth. And I know as some of these queer coming from Calgary, it's not like you didn't know about oppression or anything like that.
Yeah, totally.
But definitely people are going to be a lot more inclined to get on board with you if you're making it fun. And if you're making it sexy. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I know that it did, like, people opened doors for me and people inspired me. And so I really wanted to do that. And so it was like, I loved writing the Lick piece. It wasn't fun to write about celebrities, as you know, like you said it was hard to read. It was hard to write.
Yeah.
And it was part of it too, was like, that's why I was really careful to like cite those news articles about the violence that started happening on Davie Street after Stacked came up, and like about the violence of the staff member, one of the key staff, managers that worked there, right? About the violence of his past. Right. And so that to me was like, no, it wasn't just me being gaslit. Like, you know what I mean? Like these things were happening because you can feel gaslit, you know what I mean? All that kind of stuff. So that part for me was kind of cathartic. And there's also, it's just like Lick, we made such a positive impression. So many of us did become DJs. Like Casey is killing it. Skylar is killing it.
Totally.
Like, Rhiannon's killing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it was cool. Like when I look back on it too, and like it was like pretty like ethnically diverse, and it was pretty diverse in terms of gender and in terms of sexuality. Like we were like, I think like, looking back, I can see like how important that was. And at the time, it was just this kind of dirty little club, and like my partner too, who was running all three of them, like Lick, was always like, why do you care so much about Lick? Like it's just a shit box. Like why do you care?
My God.
I'd be like, you don't understand how important this is. This space is to.
Lick was the first bar I had ever been to that was, for queer people. I refer to it as a lesbian bar. I mean, I'd been to detours and stuff, but that was, I felt the presence was for females or like women.
It was.
As you say here. And that was the first time I'd experienced that, where I went as a gay boy and I was like, oh, I'm not the most important person in the room right now.
You're not like the youngest, hottest twink anymore.
Totally. And I remember, oh my God, making out with this person that I thought was a twink, but and we were in the corner and they took off their shirt and had boobs. And I was like, oh my God, I just made out with a girl for like Or I don't know if she identified as a girl. She had boobs anyway. So it was a mind fuck for me in those early days of partying to go into these queer spaces in Vancouver that were something new. But I was just going, like I said, to have fun. And
Right.
I ended up being part of this amazing, magical queer space that no longer exists.
Well, and I loved you. You were really talented, and you were the right. You know, you were very much a club kid, though. Like you were there, you looked
Totally.
fabulous, and you acted fabulous, and you know, like whatever drama was happening was fun and cool. It wasn't whack and weird.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you were very talented. And
Thank you.
I forget what song it's. I don't know what it's called, but it's "Buy Me a Drink." "Buy Me a Drink" was
Buy Me a
really
Drink, Buy Me a
good.
Drink. Yeah.
And that's why I was like behind you, and that's why I wanted to hook you up with Maxwell. I'm like, you need to make this track. Like, you need to get on stage. Like, you know, and it's empowering regardless of how far it went or whatever. You know what I mean? It was still like, and fun. And people, I used to drop that jam. I used to fucking mix that shit in, and people be like, you know, like in different cities. Cities, and people knew it. They knew it out here. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I cannot talk enough about how pivotal nightlife was for me, because like you said, it doesn't really matter how far something goes. If you are able to experience that fantasy in real life, it makes you feel like anything is possible. And people turn up their nose at nightlife, but it's so pivotal in so many people's personal journeys. Like for me, artistically and, you know, sexually, of course, and just as a human being, spiritually, it opened me up. And I feel like learning more about your journey was like, oh, and there's also the political side that is so important.
Well, I mean, Stonewall.
Like, exactly.
Like that was a party.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it, you know, and it was forced to become so politicized. But I mean, like, it's always, and I always feel that like art is ahead of theory, and like art drives revolution, and that music, I mean, growing up for me, like music is how I learned about apartheid, because I heard Don't Want to Play Sun City. Like I learned about oppression and like all the ugly stuff in the world that didn't really affect me as a young white middle-class girl in Calgary.
Yeah. You're untouched, kind of.
You know what I mean? Well, I mean, there was definitely the sexism and the constant fear of sexual assault, but like, but again, like I didn't understand that like Canada, that South Africa modeled their apartheid system on our reservation system, on our colonial policies. Like that's where. That. So I didn't, you know, and so I was 10 and I was like, yeah, like South Africa's bad. Like they've got racism and whatever. And I thought I was like and I remember somebody, I forget who, maybe somebody older, or maybe something I read, that it was actually modeled on Canada, and that I was actually like actively participating in colonial oppression of Indigenous people. You know what I mean? Like that. And it's, you know, and so that's like, this is all around when I was like 11 or 12.
You were so young.
Well, I was thinking about COVID too. Like I was quite isolated because I was really nerdy. I was chubby, and that wasn't okay when you're a little white girl. You're not supposed to be chubby.
And you're a dancer, you said, and that.
And I got basically kind of pushed out of dancing because of my weight. And that I really, you know, that really pissed me off. I mean, but it's like part of me is like, well, so you would have been a dancer and your career would have been over at 25 anyways. Cause like dancers don't have long careers. Your body would be just as brutalized as it is now. Like, and in a way I went into dance. Like I went into a profession where I got to dance all night while I was mixing and watch other people dance and do it all the time. And I didn't have to audition for it. You know what I mean? And I didn't have to starve myself for it. Which you know what I mean? So in a way I ended up as a dancer, and I was a go-go dancer, and that's how I got even more into DJing, just from the observations of being a dancer. Like, what do people want to dance to? What do they not want to dance to? What does my body want to do at this point? What does my body want to do at that point? And then knowing what kind of music or tracks or the programming or the mixing or all of it, right, to make that happen.
Totally.
But Calgary was very like, I just, you know, like it was, I remember like, did you grow up in Bowness?
No, I was in Harvest Hills. That side,
so the new
north.
Subdivisions.
Yeah, it was.
So when I was growing up in Bonavista, there was really like very little after Fish Creek. And actually, so talking about isolation, because I was chubby, because I was so nerdy, I really was nerdy and like really into books and just really into poetry and like Shakespeare and like trying like quoting it all the time. And that's not cool when you're 10. It's just not cool. Yeah. And so I remember when we moved to Bonaventure, I was like half a block from Fish Creek. Which is, you know, like rings the city. So it's, you can half a block from Fish Creek and Benjamin locations. I was on Anderson and County Meadows, I think it is. County Meadows 5. And I guess Anderson. And it was like where it ended, like right by, like now there's that big funeral home there. And that's where my mother's funeral was. Wow. That was for me, like that's where I became a witch without knowing it. I spent a lot of time down there by myself, like writing poetry and burying it, which is like a witch. It's just a spell thing.
Totally,
I didn't know that at the time, right? Like I didn't have access to that, to Wicca or which whatever you want to call it, paganism or anything then. So I spent a lot of time alone, and then I went to a boarding school. I had to go to boarding school because I was getting kicked out of my school in grade 7 for being mouthy, essentially. And I was, went to this boarding school, and then I experienced a deep isolation there because I got ostracized. So no one would talk to me or sit with me or anything for months. And I was 13. Yeah. And then a witch took care of it. And this is when I also started like paying attention to witches and to like witchcraft, essentially. This woman, Mrs. Mallewish. But anyways, and so I was already isolated, but there was nature. I was at Brentwood College, which is like 45 minutes from Victoria, and it's on the water. And so I was so same with Fish Creek. Like I was socially ostracized. So I had no friends, but I had nature. And so I spent a lot of time there, and I would bring my books, and I would bring my notepad, and I would bring my Walkman, and I would go for it. You know what I mean?
I love that. So, yeah.
COVID reminds me of that. It's like I'm 13 again.
I love that. I mean, I want to hear a little bit more about the witch who saved you.
Mrs. Mallewish?
Yes. That's so cool. Like, did she because I, first of all, think it's really interesting that you were doing things that you would later find out are very Wiccan and witch
spellcasting.
It was just in your blood. And then I want to hear about this person who was a witch who saved you or helped you.
So I went to a boarding school in grade 8 because things were so bad, both with my relationship with my father, which is really, really bad. And I was getting in a lot of trouble at school, and they were trying to throw me out. And there was this other woman, Lee Bolton, who I dedicate my dissertation to. She was one of my teachers, and she basically kept me from being thrown out and all this stuff, but I was just done. And I forced my parents to send me to boarding school. So it was my idea. I wanted to get the fuck away from my father, the fuck away from Calgary. I was 12, 13, hormones raging. And I just was like, get me out of here, because I'm not going to survive this. And so I went, little did I know, I was like out of the frying pan to the fire. So I go to boarding school, and I'm like, it's great. And I'm 13. And there's this guy who's like, so you have like a dorm, right? So there was 3 guys to every 1 girl at Brentwood. So it was co-ed. And so my dorm's all girls. It was Mackenzie House. And then anyways, and then there's all these male dorms. And so this guy, I keep hearing that there's a guy, like this cute skater likes you. This is 89. Okay. Like 88, 89, like this cute skater likes you. And he's in grade 9. I'm in grade 8. So it's a big deal. And I don't even know who this person is. And it's boarding school. So you live there. So you can't leave. Like, so it's all the time. You see people at breakfast.
At Paris Hilton, same thing.
You see people at lunch. You see people, except it was a lot nicer. Like it wasn't reform at all. Like Brentwood was like a resort, really. Like it was. Like,
oh wow.
It was so. The tuition at that time was $20,000 a year for a grade 8 tuition. And my dad had money at that point. He doesn't anymore at all because he's disabled.
Holy shit.
But at that point, I knew my family was doing well. And so I was like, well, if I go to foster care, I'll just get raped and just totally that's terrible. So my parents have money. I'm going to get them to send me this really sweet, nice elite boarding school in Vancouver Island because I'm getting the fuck out of here. Like I was like that prescient. Wow. So I show up there and I find out there's all the girls in my grade are like, wow, you're so cool. This guy likes you. I'm just like the first week of school. And I'm like, I'm not really into it because I'm trying to get to know my roommates and establish myself with friends. And I'm also never kissed a boy. Wow. I was, I made up for it so quick though after, but anyways.
Love it.
There was nothing and shit started and it was full on. And so anyways, but not at boarding school. So I find out this guy likes me. And I also, and a couple of days later, I leave for prep. So you have to do this mandatory 2-hour study with your door open and no music and no talking in your dorm from 7 to 9 p.m. every night, including Friday nights. You go to school on Saturdays. It's
shit.
Well, there's nothing else to do, really.
Yeah.
And so this guy's waiting for me, and he's also just broken his leg, and he had crutches, and he was really cute. And he was a skater. And so he was all of a sudden, I guess he had just gotten to boarding school and decided he was going to try to have sex or something. I must have looked slutty because I had big boobs by then. I don't know why I was his target, but he started just wanted to so at first I was like, this is literally happens in the space of 72 hours. That's how compressed and intense boarding school was. So basically this guy shows up on I think it was a Thursday, and he's so he takes me out after prep and we walk around or something. And then I think the next morning he's there and he's waiting for me to take me to breakfast. I'm like, okay. And then after my morning classes, he's waiting outside my classroom to take me to lunch. And I'm like, okay. And then after afternoon classes, you do sports. And he's waiting to walk me to my dorm for sports. And I'm like, okay. And then I do field hockey. And then it's dinner time. And I'm so trying to hang out with these girls in my cohort, the grade 8 girls, my roommate. I'm trying to hang out with them. and I leave for dinner and he's there. So within 48 hours, I was being suffocated by this guy. And also that night, I didn't realize he did this on purpose. Like he led me to like this path and I didn't realize it was in front of his entire dorm. And he kissed me. And it was the first time I had ever French kissed a guy.
And everyone could see?
I didn't know that. It was like
oh my God.
It was like for their view. And it was just kissing. And it was the first time I'd ever tongue in my mouth. And that was really, and I could just see that that was kind of aggressive. And I was like, this isn't right. I don't like this. So like by hour 48 of Maren's first boyfriend, I'm like, I gotta get rid of this guy. I need to dump my boyfriend. What do I do? How do I dump a guy? I've never had a boyfriend before. And now I've got to dump one. I don't know what's going on. And I'll never forget, this is fucking, can't write this shit. Like, so I go to this school dance. There's like a welcome dance. And I remember Chris being like phoning me in my dorm, and that was his name, Chris Etherington, phoning me in my dorm and being like, I'm going to pick you up for the dance. I was like, no, Chris, I want to be I'm going with my roommate. I'm going with the grade 8 girls to the dance. I'll see you there. Like, So I show up and by the time I get there, I know I've got to dump Chris. So I'm at this dance to dump Chris Etherington, who's been my boyfriend I've known for 48 hours, and I've been at sporting school for like 72 hours, and I've already
my God,
dump this motherfucking guy. So I'm like, okay. So I get to the dance and I'm like standing there talking to Chris, and he's like, do you want to dance or something? I'm like, no, Chris, I have to talk to you because I'm just going to dump him. And all of a sudden over the loudspeakers, like, we want to dedicate this one to the lovebirds, Maren and Chris. And it was like, like, your dudes played Love Bites from Def Leppard.
Oh my God.
Which was not, I don't listen to Def Leppard. Like, this was like, they were just fucking with Chris, right? So I remember hearing that. I'm like, okay, there's your cue. Like, Love Bites, Chris, and you're dumped. Like, out you go, dump this guy. So I go outside with this guy and I'm like, trying to talk to him, but somehow he ends up on top of me and like he's trying to make out with me, and I'm lying on like a bed, like it's on the ocean, so I'm lying on like a bed of like mini crabs and rocks, and and he's trying to make out with me. He doesn't know what he's doing, so he's suffocating me. So he's trying to kiss me, but I'm like, I can't breathe. So I'm sitting there like, I can't breathe. I'm like, Chris, I can't go off you anymore. I throw him off me. I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I start to cry and I'm dumping him, and then he starts to cry. And then it's a shit show. And then I leave the dance. I go like running back to my dorm. I don't even stick for the rest of the dance. I cry all night. Next day, I don't want to go to dinner or anything because I don't want to see him. The next day, I'm at breakfast and there's like something on this chalkboard written, and all these like dudes standing around laughing about it, like grade 8, grade 9 guys laughing, and I don't see really what it is. And then I'm in line for like lunch, and I hear like mooing, and then like big mooing, and then like I go to class. So for the next 2 or 3 weeks of my life, Chris Etherington rallied all the grade 9 boys to have a movement called Ban the Bovine, Maren. And they made shirts that said Maren, like with a cow on it, and Ban the Bovine on the back. They wrote it all over all of the blackboards. When I would go to class, if I walked back past a grade 9 classroom, everyone would moo at me. My grade 8 girl cohort started mooing at me. None of the girls in grade 8 would sit with me at lunch or anything because I was being mooed at all the time. And they were like, sorry, we're trying to make friends. Like, you're not cool. So I was completely ostracized, and I had nobody. So I had to like go to breakfast by myself while everybody mooed at me. Literally, I'm not making this up. And so I stopped going to meals, and I was just sort of trying to like sneak food and eat it later. And like, it was really hell, but I wasn't going to be a tattletale. I wasn't going to rat him out because that would make me even more uncool, right? Yeah. So I put up with this for like 3 weeks. And then I was playing field hockey in a game outside of Ellis House, which was Chris's dorm. And so the field hockey pitch is right outside. And so I'm trying to play field hockey, and all of a sudden I hear this super mooing in like fucking stereo. They've recorded themselves mooing and then are replaying it on someone's kick-ass fucking stereo. So I'm playing field hockey and it's like, man, like mooing and my name. And I'm just like, I don't know if it was because it was like the fact that there was like a sound system involved, that I was just like, I've had a fucking enough right now. Like, he was like, you know what I mean? God. Like, and I lost it, and I threw my stick down and I left the pitch, and I was like fucking crying, and I was so upset. And so grade 8, our cohort, we had like what was like, I forget what they were called, but she would have been like a den mother. Like her job was to like be your surrogate mother to the grade 8 girls. And her name was Mrs. Mallywish. And she was fucking cool. And she used to talk about how she'd be going to parties and castles in England and stuff. And she had long hair and lots of rings, and she was beautiful and, you know, smoked and drank coffee. And like, she was so cool. So Mrs. Mallywish, because she was in charge of me, came over, I forget, or whatever. I had talked to Mrs. Mallywish, and she was like, what the fuck is going on? And I wouldn't tell her. She's like, look, Maren, if you tell me, I won't tell anybody. I won't tell anybody that you told me. I will say that a prefect told me, which is like somebody that's like in grade 12 that's like got power over the school, because it's a British boarding school, right? So there's all this like British hierarchy. So anyway, she's like, I'll say that a prefect told me, and I'm gonna make this stop for you. Like, this is gonna stop immediately if you'll just let me make this stop for you. And I was like, okay, fine. So you're gonna love this. So the next day, suddenly there's no mooing. No one's mooing at me. There's no more mooing. There's no more shirts that say ban the bovine. There's no more, big illustrations on the chalkboard about my fatness. And Chris Etherington actually phones me and apologizes, which I didn't care about, but I was like, sure, bra, thanks. And it stopped immediately. Okay. This is when I really was like, witchcraft is fucking for real. Like 5 days later, like a week later, not very long after, Chris Etherington is in his dorm room by himself, and he's got the lights off, and he's got his covers up, and he's got, apparently it was AC/DC cranked on his Walkman. And his roommate walks in and basically finds Chris jerking off. And he's, these are grade 9 boys, so they're not cool, right? They're not like, oh yeah, bro, everybody does it. I'll have a wank with you, even though, we say we're straight. Like, it wasn't like that would be nowadays, right? I would assume.
Yeah.
So basically, Chris is whacking off, so his roommate busts him wanking off. Like, apparently there's like AC/DC cranked in his fucking Walkman too. So his roommate is like, haha, I just caught you. So his roommate starts calling him Jack Etherington. And then the next thing you know, because it's boarding school and everything's happening, like so quickly, it's because you don't get to go home and have this break and then come back. It's all just keeps on going. So the next thing you know, within 24 hours, not just the grade 9 boys, the entire school is calling Chris Jack Etherington. And every time he walks by, I was like, hey, Jack Etherington, how's it going? Hey, Jack, so Chris Etherington was not as tough as me, apparently, and goes to the headmaster and is like, everyone's making fun of me, make it stop. And the headmaster's like, no, I know what you did to Maren Hancock. This is what you deserve. Chris fucking ran away that night.
What?
Handle it. And he never came back.
Oh my God.
So I don't know what Mrs. Maluish did, but that's when I knew, like, what comes around goes around. Because what he did to me, he got back 3 times.
It's so fucking crazy that was such an early experience for you. Like, no wonder you were such a strong, outspoken feminist. Like,
well, after that, I realized, like, nothing will break you, Mary. Like, I this kid ran away, and I survived this for like 3 weeks. Like, and so I just then realized that I was very tough. And then after that, sort of all the grade 9 girls and everybody thought I was cool again. I was like, fuck you, bitches. Like, where were you when I needed you? Like, so I became very independent because I developed really like the wall of snobbery around me, really like an armor. Like, I'm too good for you. I'm too smart. I'm too, like, I had to, like, that rest of the year at boarding school, I just was solo.
Yeah.
So this is what I'm saying, like, and COVID reminds me of being 13 again. Just like you just.
Well, I mean, it makes you resilient. Like, if a lot of people go crazy when they're by themselves, but if you're able to have that moment first, then it's not as scary. And what you're saying with that Chris guy, it reminds me of something you wrote when I was reading this morning about how you would see the white frat boys come into a bar and you would instantly feel like uncomfortable. And I remember feeling that too back then in the clubs, but I would never identify that as them being the problem because, like you said, growing up in Calgary, I was around white jocks all the time. I was so used to being uncomfortable that I didn't make the association. I knew I wasn't comfortable, but like that white bro culture that we're now so open about bringing down was such a fucking. It makes the presence alone of them coming into the club. When I read that this morning in your dissertation, I was like,
well,
I
and
remember
also just the insult of being told that, if 2 black guys, like literally in business suits, walk into the kits, I'm not supposed to play any hip hop because there's a gang in the bar.
Yeah.
And then a whole frat walks in, or a whole football team, like men that are literally like documented as being responsible for mass acts of violence, usually against people that they consider other. Right. Mm-hmm. Or a Hell's Angels gang, like in full colors, and it's crazy. And that's also when I learned about music and crowd control. So when those frat boys would come in, they would literally request girls from the Beastie Boys. And I'd be like playing Hey Ladies, because like,
yeah, exactly.
Like, no, we're going to disco dance. And then we're going to follow that with Delight. And then we're going to follow that with Whitney Houston. And I'm not giving you what you want. And then, so that's why Stacked was also hard too, when all the straight people started coming to Stacked and they just wanted to hear LMFAO and I wanted to play Yaz, it was just like.
That party, that Tuesday night, I remember telling my friend Jared remember Jared and Leah, my
Yeah, I
roommates?
loved Leah. I remember
Yeah,
both.
I love
But I
her
was going to
too.
ask you about Leah because I just loved her so much.
She's in
Anyway,
Ottawa right now.
okay. She's
Yeah.
a cute. I love her.
Yeah.
And Jared.
I remember
Leah really shone for me. Anyways.
I remember going to Tuesday Night at Celebrities and thinking this is the coolest party I've ever been to because you had all the gay boys and you had hello?
Hi. Sorry.
Okay, my screen went blank, but I don't know why. But if you can still hear me, that's okay. Can you see
No,
me?
I didn't have any glitches on my end.
Okay, cool. I remember there being like gay boys there, but then like right on the dance floor, there were straight people too. And I felt like it was the first time I described a party as being mixed.
Right. Well, a lot of that too, the inspiration that came from the warehouse. The warehouse was such a huge influence on me in Calgary. And I remember being like, they would make these pins that said straight, not narrow. And so the warehouse was really good at educating straight people about being queer allies before they really had a language for that. Like, again, this is like 1991, right? And like the warehouse was the first time I experienced that. The first time I saw like flamboyant gay waiters or just flamboyant gays or men making out or whatever. And I loved that being that because even though I was attracted to dudes mostly, like I knew the dudes that were going to the warehouse weren't going to be the frat boy jock types because they're not going to tolerate men kissing or whatever. So that was really, so I always wanted to recreate that environment and that's what Stacked was for me too. So it was very upsetting when it started getting so straight and so to the point where we had violence on Davie Street.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Like, and also just what happened with celebrities too. Like, I mean, I found out recently that before COVID, my gay husband was the booking manager there. So it's like he got fired for sexually harassing me. And now he's running the motherfucking joint.
I had no idea. Like I remember you being upset about Stacked and seeing obviously that they had taken a night from you, but I didn't realize the extent that what was happening behind the scenes, that they were only paying you $200, that my gay husband was sexually assaulting you in the DJ booth, that they were essentially like slowly taking over the promotional material and booking, and also telling you what to play. I mean, that must have been so hard to see a club, 800 people on a fucking Tuesday, killing it, like making way more money than they did on the weekends.
I hate to think of how much money I made those motherfuckers.
I know, it's crazy, but it was really hard for me to read that kind of huge success that you obviously created being taken from you and Michael Venus, who I love, I'm trying to get on the show, who they just stole it from you. And I remember being a gay kid on Davie Street and talking about how Celebrities was turning straight, and it was really fucking annoying because the Odyssey was also closing at that time and we were running out of bars and nobody seemed to care. Like in the community we did. And I remember when you moved to Granville and we used to go to the Republic to see you every Tuesday. I think I did a show there even. But
Thank you for support.
Of course. I mean, I love to support you. You are an amazing DJ and you were such good energy and you really did bring that inclusion vibe. And I hate that happened to you. And I'm glad that I read it because I learned something about that time. That point on Davie Street for Celebrities specifically was not a good time for them.
No, so it was nice. So it was really, I mean, and that's another reason, I mean, COVID's been so hard, but like watching our spaces like the Beaver close.
Yeah.
Even the Hi-Fi in Calgary, which wasn't necessarily a queer bar, but it was such a special place too. Like, this outgrowth of the Night Gallery and like Pete and Mike being so.
Oh my God, the Night Gallery used to have 1 cent drinks.
I know.
Like when I first turned 18, it was 1 cent drinks.
Calgary people like don't understand how out of control drinking culture was in Calgary. Like,
oh my God.
The warehouse used to do 350 paralyzers, triple, not 350 paralyzers, 350 triple paralyzers in a pint, like in a big like beer, like whatever, like 350 and oh my God, and like also I loved the Night Gallery because they did Derylizers, which is a paralyzer with dark rum.
Oh my God, no, I never had that.
And the only place I've ever been able to have one in Toronto was the Piston. Like, and I on my birthday, Ryan took me there, my co-producer, dyslexia, took me there, like, anyways. I mean, Calgary had that's the other thing I think about was Calgary was so redneck that I feel that everybody that was underground or queer or just not a homophobe and wanted to be an ally, we all stuck together. So I feel like you had like the bangers hanging out with the skaters, hanging out with the hip hop kids. And it was all the reaction to the country music and the sports, and the rock mentality, right? And so that's why the Night Gallery was so effing cool.
What do you think it is about nightlife that creates such amazing opportunities for people to discover who they are?
Well, I mean, that's a really good question. And I think so many things just, I mean, and it's, of course it's changed now because we have the internet, right? And that's
Yeah.
impacted everything crazily. So for, for me being young, I mean, for me at the time, a place that it was dark. So you know what I mean? You weren't, so you could be seen in the ways that you wanted to be seen. You know what I mean?
Yep.
You could, like, dress up and, like leave, your high school or your parents or whoever's, abusing you in your life or whatever away and like be and dancing. For me, I loved dancing, and
Mm-hmm.
you wanted to be looked at when you were dancing and like experience like making out with strangers, like really human connection, right? Which is why
Yep.
nightclubs persisted despite the fact that when we got the internet and you no longer had to go to a club to hear new music. And that part kind of really did suck. Like people, we went from an evolution of people like coming to hear me so they could hear the new Madonna single, because me and a handful of DJs are the only ones that had it in Vancouver, to coming to the club and shoving your phone in my face and asking me to play this top 40 song that you were listening to in your car all the way into the club. Why the fuck do
Yeah.
you need to hear it now, bitch? Like,
Yeah.
just like,
Or just like remember when to see an artist, you had to wait for them to come to your city to do a concert. And
right.
I like seeing Shania Twain when I was growing up. It was so fucking amazing because she was so famous. And the only way you could have access to these people was by going to the concert, waiting for hours to get a ticket, and then being with 16,000 people screaming, seeing them. And now you have so much access to music, to artists, that it like,
Right.
the idea of going to a club to hear a new song. And in the early days, I do remember that with some singles, but when I was getting into the club scene, definitely that was changing, but it loses that. I don't know. Like, do you think clubs are less important now, and nightlife will lose its cultural impact? Like, where are kids going to discover themselves?
Well, this is what Mandy, I think it is. It's either Mandy or Lee, and also I believe DJ She, Tara Reeves, Jane Blaze now, talks about in chapter 6. They're like, so a lot of women or a lot of people were like, lick is where I came out. Lick, like when I
Yes.
realized I was gay, or I realized I was lesbian, I realized I was into girls, the only place I knew to go was Lick. You know what I mean? Or in Calgary, the only place I knew to go was the Warehouse or to 318 or to Detour, right? Where my sister actually met her husband at Detours. But anyways,
What?
yeah,
That's
yeah,
so cool.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, so I don't know, like, and so I know you. I mean, definitely, like it did continue. Like spaces like again, like spaces like the Beaver, which was like this small space where they were still doing nights and they were still doing like House of Filth stuff, and like just like it was still politicized and it was still fresh and there were still new things that you had to leave your house to experience, right?
Yeah.
I don't think that. So I think in case of the Beaver, we're going to need those spaces, and that if/when we get to congregate again, those spaces will come back. I don't think we need these big, bloated, overgrown, huge super clubs like Celebrities, which
No.
is not, let's
No.
face it, not gay, or Rebel,
Yeah.
where I played, or even something like the Mod Club. I mean, that's, that was a good place for mid-sized bands or whatever. But I think we'll definitely see. This is one of my current research is on right now. Is
Okay.
basically what is how we know how COVID's impacted DJ culture. We know how COVID has impacted underground and queer nightlife. So what is going on in the future? What is for the future? A lot of it's showing up in video games, but of course, like being a gamer means you have access to a certain amount of bandwidth. You have access to a certain amount of equipment, right? So not everybody can participate in virtual events.
Yeah.
We're starting to see a reification of class and race and all that stuff that comes with it, right? But I do think that spaces like the Beaver will come back. Glad Days still hanging on, thank goodness.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, I do agree with you, the smaller spaces. It's kind of like the idea of being a massive influencer versus in the future just being like influencing your bubble and letting go of that. The idea of even a superstar is changing because fame is so accessible now. I mean, you have kids on TikTok who become quote unquote famous for making a 15-second video, but before the whole allure of being a superstar was like it was hard. It was
Yeah.
like impossible to happen. And with nightlife,
that's one of the reasons I didn't walk away from Stink Mitt for so long. When it sort of became early on like untenable, I realized, and that the dynamics between me and Kate were just so wasn't, you know, it was a fight because it was a real struggle. But because I felt like I'd been given something that everybody else wants, even though I didn't really want that deep down inside, I didn't. I was given something everybody else wants, and I felt like I should be trying to do it because everybody wants this, right? As everybody wants these opportunities. I'm sort of going through something like that, right now, where I'm supposed to be making a movie.
You are?
Well, yeah, I'm supposed to. I mean,
what kind of movie?
Well, about Regine. I don't. So I know that you didn't. I just talk about this a bit in my introduction, but during my research, I found out that there's a woman in history that is. I'm not going to say she was the world's first DJ, and there's this dialogue about who's the world's first DJ, and it's really like, how do you even determine that? Because we don't know who was doing what in Botswana at the same time as Reykjavik, at the same time as Ljubljana, at the same time as Edmonton in 1930. We don't really know who the first person was to play a record for an audience to dance to, a paid audience to dance to, which is the definition of DJ, and not radio DJ, but someone who plays music for people to dance to for commercial purposes, and there's like a money involved, and so it's supposed to be this guy Jimmy Savile, who is the UK's most notorious pedophile. After he died, it came out that he raped and assaulted over 500 kids, most of them vulnerable kids in hospitals. Look him up, Jimmy Savile. He was very good friends with Prince Charles. He was aided and abetted by the CBC, and the BBC. I'm looking at parallels between him and Ghomeshi as well, right? And so he's aided and abetted by the BBC, and he died, and then a year later it comes out. But he's considered, and by some major journalists of DJ culture, specifically Brewster and Broughton, who wrote Last Night a DJ Saved My Life, which is the most popular book on DJ culture. So if anybody knows anything about DJ culture, it's from reading this book. So this book has had a great impact. So in the book, they declared Jimmy Savile, despite being a pedophile and a horrible person, was the first DJ. Now, there's no evidence to actually prove that. It's just that Jimmy Savile said that in one of his autobiographies, and because he's a white British man, everybody's like, yeah, you must be first because you're white and male. And so, I uncovered this woman, Regine Zilberberg, she was the first person to just go by her first name, Regine. So before Cher, before Madonna, before Shakira, we had Regine, and she was the original club kid. Peter, you would love her.
Oh my God.
I'm getting goosebumps because she is your girl. Look her up. So she's credited with inventing the nightclub. She invented ball.
What are you talking about?
You've never heard of her, right? You've never heard of her. And
no.
That's my issue, is that no one knows about this woman, and she's huge. So I was so as I'm discovering this, and I'm like freaking out every day because I'm discovering more and more how important this Regine woman is that I've never even heard of. And I'm in year 8 of my research on DJ culture. Like, I should have known this from the get-go. I should have known this when I was 13. Yeah. I should have known that a woman named Regine invented nightclubbing. Carl Lagerfeld, not that he's cool, went on to record saying Regine invented nightclubbing. She started the Whiskey of Go-Go, and she's credited. She says she was the world's first DJ, and it's true. There's this. Anyways, long story short,
this is so cool.
It is cool, and now that I'm talking about it, I'm being reminded that it's cool. But it's so basically, it's a lot like Stink Mitt. I got talked into making a movie that I wasn't trying to make. Like Stink Mitt, I wasn't trying to be a rapper. Kate and I did Stink Mitt as a joke. We only had 2 songs. It was just for a joke. Because I had speech, because I was a performer, because I actually performed poetry and wrote poetry and was a musician and all that, it wasn't a huge leap for me to rap. I was terrible compared to Kate, of course, in the beginning, and I still am terrible compared to Kate, but I'm on my own a decent rapper. She's just so incredible. And so basically I had this awesome roommate who's a close friend of mine, Kelly Ballon, who also went to VFS, but he's older, total sweetheart. He was my roommate at the time, and he's a movie producer. He's with Karma Film, and they just did a really amazing film on Gabriel Dumont, Louis Riel's, I think, uncle or great grand. Sorry. Anyways, called The Shadow of Dumont. It's amazing. So Kelly's like, this Regine story is really compelling. Like, I kind of want to do something on it. And I was like, oh, I'm not, I don't know movies and all this stuff. He talked me into what was supposed to be me just coming on as a writer and as like a character in this documentary about Regine. And because he's a Superman, went and got funding, like a lot, like a substantial amount of funding just to do a demo, like not for the whole thing, like more funding than I was like, this is the opposite of the record industry. The record industry, you pay $50K to make a demo. Yeah. They don't give you $50K to make a demo. So Bell Canada gave us this whack of money, and we were looking for director. We couldn't really find any, but we weren't necessarily looking super hard because it just isn't my wheelhouse.
Right.
So then Kelly talked me into directing it. And so now I'm supposed to be directing this demo. And we sort of got going.
That's so cool.
I'm glad you think so. Like
I just can't believe that in all my obsession about club kids and nightlife and, you know, celebrities that come from that world, I have never once thought about who invented clubbing and who was the first club kid and who was the first DJ.
We know about Michael Alig, like who polluted.
Yeah, we know about those people. Yeah, he was a white boy though, too. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but you know what I mean? Because she's a woman. And it's also when you look at what she did, you're like, how is this woman not a household name? Like, how is she not? And it's because women's contributions to history get neglected. They get dismissed. They get omitted. They get downplayed. They get obscured. They get appropriated by men. You know what I mean? Like all that kind of stuff. And so, you know, when I talk to you about it, like the fire in me returns, like, but because I didn't know it's like Stink Mitt. Like I didn't know, I wasn't trying to be in a band. And then all of a sudden I'm on tour with National Pussy and EMI is hitting us up and we're supposed to, you know, we're like in these talks and we have a lawyer and all this shit. And like, I wasn't ready for that. I was just trying to do my nerdy schoolwork and get by. And I feel like this is just this all over again. I think that you just need to follow it. I mean, if anybody's going to do a movie about the woman who invented nightlife, it's either got to be you or Courtney Love. Hello. I'm not into Courtney Love. And I have more institutional memory than you. I actually know people that were around her. I was around at that time. She's not an innovator. She did not create Riot Girl. She's not, like, honestly, she is a Jimmy Savile. I don't want to say that she molested all these people, but like Courtney Love I was there. She wasn't part of the Riot Girl movement. Like
I remember you. Okay, so I remember Leah and I were both obsessed with Courtney Love, and I remember meeting you.
Like Lydia Lunch is who you should be obsessed with.
I remember you saying that, and I wanted to ask you about Courtney Love because I feel like for my generation, she was like the epitome of like the anti-establishment.
Because that's what you were allowed. That's what was accessible via Sassy magazine and via Much Music. Like she was just in the mainstream, and that was her goal, was to be in the mainstream, right? Her goal was to take on that. Like that was all. I remember, like I'll never forget. I was like 18 or 19, and of course we were underground and we were punk rock, and like we were listening to Sonic Youth, and we were like, you know, like going, you know, ordering records from the attic and picking them up. And we were like very committed to underground culture. And I'll never forget. And I wasn't so much into Riot Girl and the music. Like I wasn't really into Bikini Kill musically and all that stuff, but I loved the politics of it, obviously.
Yeah.
Lydia Lunch is pre-Riot Girl, actually. And she's still making incredible art. And I was into Lydia and all that stuff. And I remember going over to a girlfriend's house and they had TV and I didn't have TV and Much Music was on. And I saw this video of this chick who was wearing like strategically ripped jeans and a plaid shirt around her waist and saying like, when you fuck her. And it was Alanis Morissette. I was like, oh, bitch, please. You fucking try hard. You are appropriating. Oh, girl, you're 2 years too late. And I was like, here we go. Here's the mainstream appropriating Riot Girl. Here we are. What is this fresh hell?
Oh, my God.
And I know that Alanis Morissette's also considered people of your generation this hero and stuff. But to me, I knew that they were products of capitalism. That they weren't.
Oh, my God. Oh, my God.
She wasn't PJ Harvey. You know what I mean?
So what do you think about these people then?
So it's like
well, what do you think then of these people who are like? Oh my
Sorry.
God. What do you think that is the value of these pop stars who are the capitalistic, I guess, regurgitation of something authentic that's happening behind, like away from the cameras?
I would say you're right. You know what? There is because for little girls that don't know what quote unquote any better, and I don't want to put it up as a hierarchy, they are empowering.
Right, like Courtney Love was. If you compare Courtney Love to Britney Spears, which was also really popular then, it's like who is giving up?
But fair enough.
Oh, you do? Okay, I want to ask you about her next. But what do you think about, so do you think there is still value?
It's good. Like another thing, like someone I really respect, Dr. Bowman, who is like invented popular music studies and wrote this whole, just one of his recent works that he was nominated for a Grammy for was the liner notes for Jackie Shane's reissue. Jackie Shane was a transgendered woman of color singer that was based in Toronto. So Dr. Bowman, because I was like, Spice Girls, you know, they just were watering down Riot Girl and girl power isn't the same as let's overthrow the patriarchy and all this stuff. But Dr. Bowman was explaining to me that for his daughter, his 18-year-old daughter, the Spice Girls were hella empowering.
Oh my God, yes.
So it's not about the purity of theory, right? Like, oh, you know what I mean? So I didn't know. So Courtney Love, personally, not for me, but I appreciate the impact that she had on girls that did see her as punk rock, that did see her as not caring, as fighting patriarchy, as bucking beauty norms. She was good at that, you know. Then of course she did get plastic surgery, but fair enough. Like, but
Yeah.
also I understand that too, because when you're on camera all the time and you see yourself all the time, like, and people say shit about you, you know, it can be like, there's definitely that pressure. But, and
Yeah.
so like, you know, I just mellowed in my old age, like again, when I was 18, if I heard AC/DC, like, gross. But now I'm like, fucking yeah, man, she was a fast machine. Like, I'm totally into it. Like, I'm completely mellowed. I'm
Oh
just
my
gonna get some
God.
water. I'll be right back. Okay.
Okay, no problem.
And we can talk about Britney if you want.
Yes, I do.
Because Peter, I think, was it you that I saw on Facebook this morning, and it was a comparison between Britney and somebody else that.
Oh, Princess Diana.
Diana.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm watching The Crown, and you know, I remember when Princess Diana died. I was very young, but what I'm
I have a good
remembering
memory.
now,
I
all
can
of
attest
the
to that.
YouTube videos I've watched about Diana and how she felt trapped by the family and about fame, and she was kind of rebellious in that she didn't do what the royal family wanted her to do. And then you read about Free Britney now, how Britney is like trapped by this conservatorship. She can't leave her house. She can't do anything. There was a point where it was the paparazzi who was literally making her a prisoner, but now it's like the confines of these contracts she's under. And I don't know. I see a correlation between these famous blonde women who get trapped by this system that they may or may not have wanted to be a part of. Like Britney was too young to, I mean, she was 14, 15 when she signed this huge record deal. And Diana fell in love and married into a family. So I don't know if those are choices or not, but I see a connection, you know, of these two women who are suffering in the public eye.
Of course. I mean, they're both, you know, women that are supposed to adhere to norms of white femininity. And
Yep.
when they step outside those norms of white femininity, they are in trouble. So for Diana, it was having a sexuality, right? It was being sexual person. It was being somebody with emotions.
Yeah, our
you know,
personality
like
even.
extreme version of white femininity, right? Like the most sort of extreme one. But I think same with Britney. I mean, one of my favorite, like, I love Blackout because she co-wrote some of it. It's fucking good.
It's
Piece
so
Me
good.
Good. Give Me More is good. Like, those are, I love that album, to be honest. And like, and there's a really good Dickie D remix of Give Me More.
I love Dickie Do.
I know, he's so good. So good.
So good.
But no, I do see that correlation. And Diana, I mean, Diana, when I heard about Diana dying, I went to Bumbershoot, which was this amazing concert in Seattle. And at the time it was only $10. And I saw like Motorhead and Medeski Martin and Wood and Michelle Noncello and Sandra Bernhard. She was 9 months pregnant and she covered, she did Don't Stop Believing with a Casio. It was amazing.
Oh my God.
And I saw Sonic
Sandra
Youth
Bernhard, wow.
and I saw, like, it was crazy. And I remember we partied all night and we were coming home and my cousin lived in Seattle. This is 1997, summer 1997. And we came home and I was like sitting on the porch having a smoke or whatever. I'd been up all night. And literally the newspaper came. It was 1997. We had newspapers being delivered still. Newspaper came and the person threw it on the porch. I looked at this headline, Princess Diana dead, car crash. And I was like, already tripping balls, right? So I was like, holy shit. And so I do remember where exactly I was. Not because I was a huge Princess Diana fan. I'm not a non-fan. I just wasn't into the royal family. Why, you know, I was into Sonic Youth and Lady Lunch. And hip hop, right? But I remember being like, oh fuck, you know, like, yeah. And so same with Britney, and like, you're right. And the press, but again, they're not adhering to norms of white femininity. And I think for Stink Mitt, we did that organically like that. We weren't really, again, we started as a joke. We weren't really trying to do anything necessarily political, but it ended up being that way. But in calling ourselves Betti Forde and Jenny Craig, white women are supposed to be thin, and they're not supposed to be wasted. Yeah. So that was, I think, what we were trying to invert, right? Was norms of white femininity. And you know, and so did Courtney Love and so did the Spice Girls. Now, whether or not that was coming from them as artists or you know, the capitalist, you know, white supremacist capitalist patriarchal machine realized that would be marketing, because there's also a way that you can, you know, if you give people access to ideas and they think that they're rebelling, you can keep them from actually rebelling.
See, this is an interesting point, is like, if the Spice Girls are inspiring girls in that way, like they're giving them a taste of maybe there are more potent avenues for them to get it, but it's giving them at least there's an avenue there to like pursue. And it's a message of like girl power, which is empowering for, you know, teeny boppers around the world. But is it still a positive message if the forces behind it are just to make money? You know, like the Spice Girls were they were authentic in that they were friends and they had this, you know, campy thing going on. I think it's hard to fake, but
Yeah, no,
it's
I think you're right. I
obviously,
think that
you know,
I think that they were genuinely were empowered by each other and generally were empowered by being able to be in a group with four other women. You know,
yeah.
because usually you're the only girl, right? Often.
But do you
Back
think
then.
the capitalistic forces, like the record labels, is waters down the message?
Oh
Like,
yeah.
does it make it less meaningful?
Yes, and there's tons of academic work about this too. Like yeah, like this is not new. This is there's tons of there's basically yeah, like so basically you can neuter it. You know, like you can sort of yeah, you can take out some of its potency. But at the same time, if it reaches, if it's always, it's neither either or, it's always and, right? Like, and because we live in a Western society that prioritizes dichotomies, it's hard for us to leave aside dualistic thinking. But I'm glad the Spice Girls happened. I think they did more good than harm. And I think that because they had a wider reach.
Yes.
You know, if girls who listen to Spice Girls and it makes them like more like prioritize female friendships and see themselves as creators and see that, you know, making music with your girlfriends is fun, I'm all for it. You know, and if it leads to like, you know, overthrowing the white supremacist capitalist patriarchy, I'm even more here. You know what I mean? But
yeah, totally.
yeah.
They inspired a whole generation of artists for sure. I mean, and I think feminism is part of what they were preaching. So do you think it's possible to become a huge superstar at that level without being watered down? Like, can you be a full potent force
Dolly
without
Parton.
the influence? Who?
Dolly Parton.
Oh.
She just funded like
The vaccine.
And I do think so, yeah. And I think she's one of them. Lydia Lunch is another, but Lydia never achieved mainstream. She never wanted to. Like Lydia never did anything mainstream. She still doesn't. Like probably the most people would know her from as being the last guest on Anthony Bourdain's Parts Unknown. She's the very last person that he talks to. And it's actually a really beautiful life affirming interview where she's like kind of, it's so prescient if you watch it, but sorry, I just thinking about him just got a little bit overwhelmed. So okay. Dolly Parton is one, and I know that there's some other ones too. Like Marilyn Monroe was very, very interesting. I became a feminist because of Marilyn Monroe because I was this is around the 12, 13 again. I was so into Marilyn Monroe as a little girl that I read everything on her. And so one day, the new book about Marilyn Monroe came out, and it was in the library, and it was by this woman, Gloria Steinem, that I had never heard of. So I read Marilyn by Gloria Steinem when I was 12, and all of a sudden, it was talk about a light bulb moment. Talk about like an aha moment. I was like, this is why men sexually harass me. This is why my mom is this way. This is why my father's this way. This is why I'm afraid to walk down the street by myself. This is why I've been made to feel like it's my fault. And all of a sudden I understood. I got feminist theory. I got a working definition of patriarchy from Marilyn Monroe by accident. So I radicalized me. I went from like just being, and Marilyn Monroe was very interesting. She very much tried to use her power. Like she was a really good example of an anti-racist activist. She was friends with Ella Fitzgerald, and Ella Fitzgerald couldn't get booked at certain clubs in Hollywood because she was Black. And Marilyn Monroe grew up as an orphan and I think understood what it was like to be so oppressed, right, or whatever, even though she was white and stuff. But she grew up and she had a horrible upbringing as a little girl, right? Like in and out. Her mom was in and out of the psych ward. Marilyn was in and out of foster care and orphanages. She was married off at 16 just so she wouldn't have to go to another orphanage. And so I think, so Marilyn Monroe said to this club owner, I think it was some huge club, I forget, in Hollywood that wouldn't book Ella Fitzgerald. She's like, if you book Ella Fitzgerald, I will take a front row center seat every night for every performance she does and the press will go wild. And you'll,
oh my God, wow.
And so the guy went for it. So Marilyn did it. And it worked. And then Ella Fitzgerald is quoted as saying, after she did that, I never had to play another shitty nightclub again. She never had to play another small club again.
I just got goosebumps. That's such a cool story.
It's not like white people are saviors or anything like that, but I'm thinking this is a woman who was strategically using her privilege and using what she had done and her public recognition in a way that's going to benefit all of humanity.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what Dolly Parton is doing. too. Right? And also, from my knowledge of Dolly Parton, because I'm not a big country fan, but I think like she's written some beautiful songs. I don't think she's really said anything offensive. Like,
yeah, exactly. And she's so authentic. Like she's the same way all the time. She's just like this constant, she's open, she's vulnerable, but she's also a cartoon character. And she has all of the things you want from a performer without losing, like what so many people become superstars, they lose their connectivity. Like they stop being able to connect. Madonna, it's like, what planet is she even on? Even Gaga, to a point now, I feel like it's harder to see her as one of our own, where she was coming up, it felt authentic.
Oh, that's right. She's the one that was the best line when you met her at the Commodore and you were trying to take her to this party or that party. And she was like, take me somewhere that smells like piss. What did she say?
Oh my God. Well, I was trying to get her to do coke with me. I was like, come to my house and do coke. And like her security was around and she's like, I can't, but I want some. I know she asked for pot, and she was drinking whiskey out of a teacup. I don't remember the piss story, but she
said she'd take me somewhere that smells like urine, and you took her to Odyssey. She was basically like, take me to a shitty fucking gay dive bar.
Yeah.
Take me some. I remember that clearly from you. I mean, maybe I don't think I made that up. But
no, I don't. I do remember her at the Odyssey. I don't remember the piss thing. I remember like begging her to do coke with me, and she was like, no. So
that's a commitment, buddy. Like that's a commitment.
I know. Like, and why is that the first thing that I wanted to ask her? Like, I'm sitting with Lady Gaga in a club.
Some people would have been very grateful.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure that might have been the first thing James Murphy asked me about when I got to play with him at Celebrities.
Really?
I don't know that. You know what? Strike that. I don't want to say that. I'm not saying that on the record.
Taking it out. Moving on. Okay. One thing I also wanted to ask you about was just to wrap things up. You. This is not the last question, but I wanted to ask because I saw the word a few times. Is like hedonism in nightlife and how that lifestyle affects being an activist or being an artist or just being inspired. Like, do you think there's a direct link, or do you think they're separate?
There's a completely direct link. I mean, if you look at jazz, the history of jazz, and you look at what was happening with the civil rights movements in the 50s and 60s, and that's when we get bebop, right? Which is a very expressive, kind of radical at the time sound. Oh no, I think it's completely linked. Like I think it's sorry, what was the question again?
Just like the relationship between hedonism and I guess, yeah, social activism and being an artist and pushing society forward. Like, do you have to go to that extreme in order to push yourself and then push other people, you know?
I don't know if you have to go to that extreme.
Because nightlife and hedonism go hand in hand, and so many things are birthed in nightlife. And so I'm wondering, like, I always thought that, you know, I don't think that being tragic is cool anymore, but there was a connection between the people I looked up to and their hard partying lifestyles, and there are also being brilliant. And that's something I've always tried to reconcile in my mind is like, you know, you don't necessarily have to be a hard partier in order to be brilliant, but a lot of people are, you know, like.
Look at it, I mean, I think you can say, instead of saying hard partying in terms of like, if you want to, if you want to expand your definition or reorient your definition of hedonism, I think if it's going to extremes, if that's what you mean, can be, and I think you can do that without drugs and alcohol.
Yeah.
You can do other ways, like even things like, honestly, like even things like when I was young, like staying up all night, even if you don't do any drugs or alcohol, but you're up all night, that lack of sleep, there's a kind of high associated with that.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that can make you kind of feel like there's other ways, being on a dance floor all night and dancing all night and then literally having those vibrations within your body can also transform you. So I think if we realign or whatever, refocus our definition of hedonism, I do think going to extremes or pushing your limits as a human in a good way is good for the creative process, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. I think that's important too, is separating the drugs and the alcohol with going to an extreme.
Yeah.
Because there are so many ways to experience that.
Wet lodges, for example, like if you're, like that's not in my part of my culture or whatnot, but I know, I've friends that are First Nations and like, they talk about those kinds of experiences, religious ceremonies are very much about that. You know what I mean? Like, and you look at Christians speaking in tongues, like what is that if not everyone's just fucking high off their motherfucking ass? Like,
totally. High on the Holy Spirit, honey. Okay. The last question I want to ask you is if there's somebody listening and maybe they're starting to get curious about, being a feminist and being more active and trying to find ways to use themselves as a vehicle for change, where would you tell them to begin? Because, if you go back to your early years, there was a lot of chaos and a lot of like trauma that started your journey. But do you think if you could avoid that, what would an ideal, I don't know, how do you tell people to pursue the instincts they have to be part of forward social momentum?
I mean, I think definitely being a mentor is hugely important. Like if I hadn't had Ms. Bolton and then Ms. Maluish advocate for me when I was being systemically oppressed as a young girl, I don't know what would have happened. So I think definitely like, you want to, if you're opening doors, like don't just open them for yourself. Yes. you know what I mean? Like you open and you walk through and you keep it open. And
yes.
That was like, again, like when I met you and you'd be in the lineup for Stacked and I would grab you and I'd grab Leah and Jared coming in with me because I need you. Like I need my allies here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you recognize your own, right? And or people that you want to bring onto your team and you want to mentor them so you want to be open to them and you want to be encouraging of them. And that's what you're doing with your podcast.
I'm trying. I'm finding it so inspiring. Like, I love that I was just able to talk to you for an hour and a bit about this because I've known you for so long, but it's so rare we give time to these types of conversations where we can just like ask questions. Like you're inspiring me.
We did this, my apartment or your apartment at 5 a.m. in the morning.
Oh, honey, I know.
I don't remember what we were talking about.
We have done it before, just not under these conditions.
Conversations, but the circumstances are different. This is Saturday afternoon, and I haven't even spot today.
There you go. Exactly.
I drank a lot of coffee, but no.
Thank you so much for coming on, Maren, and I'm so proud of you. I think it's such an amazing thing that you're a fucking doctor now.
Thank you. I know it is. It was a long time coming, and I'm trying to enjoy it. I'm definitely trying to let myself enjoy it. That's kind of hard on myself sometimes, but
enjoy it and go make a fucking movie.
Okay, I will.
Okay. Awesome. Okay, I'll talk to you soon.
I love you very much. Thanks.
Bye.
Again.
Love you too, Maren. Bye.